Welcome everyone to the second video lecture for chapter 14, gerunds and infinitives. I'll actually do this in two parts, two rather short little videos to finish up chapter 14. It's the last chapter that you need to know for the midterm test. A few important things to go over today. Now before we go into infinitives, I want to have a review of our previous video where we started to talk about the gerunds. So I have a little quiz here for you. Find and correct the errors in the following sentences. So each of these sentences has one mistake about some grammar that we talked about in the previous lecture, the previous video. Go ahead and hit pause, take a look, and make sure you can find each one of these. Okay, so let's start with the first, see if you can find the mistake there. We talked about no going to class. That's not the correct way to have a negative gerund phrase. The correct way was there. We talked about not going to class. Just put the not right in front of your gerund and you're done. That's all you got to do for that. Number two, I apologize for not to attend class. Now here you have this preposition here, which means can't use the infinitive here. Needs to be the gerund. I apologized for not attending class. Now that's something just to always keep in mind. If you ever have a prepositional phrase, you're not going to use the infinitive. It's going to be the gerund form. And it doesn't really matter what the preposition is. For, to, from, at, whatever the prepositional phrase is, if you're going to have an activity, it's going to be in the ing form, the gerund form. Number three, I want to going to the concert is incorrect. It should be, I want to go to the concert. Now here we have an infinitive, which of course we'll talk a lot more about today. I like to do bowling on the weekend. We don't like to say do bowling. In our previous lecture, we talked about all of these kinds of recreational activities with the ing, the gerund, and the verb we like to use with those is go. I like to go bowling on the weekend. So again, the recreational activities, go bowling, go hiking, go skiing, and all of those. In the class, we mentioned a few other recreational activities that did not follow the go ing form. So we talked about do. We talked about that for a minute. You'll never say do with the ing gerund. Oh, not generally anyway. I'm sure there may be a few exceptions. But we do use do with some different recreational activities. For example, some exercise. Do push-ups, do sit-ups, do jumping jacks. We use it with martial arts. Do kung fu, do karate, do taekwondo, do yoga, which is not exactly a martial art, but that same sort of exercise sort of thing is quite common with do. But when we have the gerund for the activity, it's going to be with go. And the last one, I don't waste much time play computer games. Of course, you can see after the verb here, we just have the base form verb with nothing else. That's not going to work. I don't waste much time playing computer games. And you just have to remember the expressions with time generally will be followed by the gerund. Waste time doing something, spend time doing something, for example. All right, so that's the review. Let's go on to infinitives. The infinitives introduction, the basic rules are quite simple. The infinitive is using to plus the base form of the verb. When I say the base form of the verb, I just mean the simplest form of the verb, the dictionary entry form, you could say, of the verb. So to see, not to seeing, not to seen, not to saw, just the very basic form. To be, not am, is, or are, or being, or anything like that. Just the base form. So some examples. I hope to see you again soon. If you have the verb hope and you want to put an action here, gerund does not work. You need to put in the infinitive. He promised to be here by 10. He promised not to be late. And there we have making the negative of an infinitive. Just add not in front of the infinitive and you're done. He promised not to be late. He promised not to go, and so on. Now that's just the basic rules there. Nothing very complicated yet. The tricky part is to remember what verbs like to have an infinitive next. And there aren't really very many rules about this. It's a lot of just memorization. Just remember, if you use the word hope, you can't follow with an action that's in the gerund. You have to do the infinitive. I hope to be rich someday. I hope to go to Australia. I promise to do my homework. You seem to be tired, and so on. You just have to remember, with these particular verbs, they're going to be followed by the infinitives. Have some more here. I agreed to go. She expects me to answer. I offered to give the money, and so on. Notice that some of these have a future focus. Now, for a lot of these things, it's quite random, where the verb, is it followed by infinitive or a gerund? Well, it seems quite random. It just depends on what English speakers have decided long ago, and we just stick with that. But there is one small pattern that we have that you see occasionally with the verbs that have a future focus. You will often use the verb to talk about something that will happen in the future. We usually go with infinitives next here. Not always, but it is a tendency. So take a look at these here. Hope to. That has a future focus, right? I hope to go tomorrow. I hope to be rich someday. Promise to often has a future focus. I promise to come early tomorrow. I promise to give you back your money next week. Not all of them, not those. This one does though. Plan to. Something you plan to do in the future. Something you would like to do in the future. Offer to is something you would say you will do for someone in the future. Expect to, and so on. So again, just some of these have a future focus. Generally, if you have a verb, the verb has that future focus feeling, a good chance it's an infinitive to come next, not the gerund. But I stress to say not always, just a potentially helpful hint there. Now page 313 has more verbs that are followed by infinitives, and there's another chart we'll talk about a little bit later as well. And now here is another form of infinitives, but just slightly more complicated. Tell is followed by an infinitive, but quite often you need to have the person that you're telling. I told you to go. I invited Stephanie to come to my party. The teacher ordered the student to do the test again. You need to have a person here before you do the infinitive. Just the nature of these verbs requires that you have the person that you are inviting, the person that you are permitting. Now, this is on page 13 also in the chart. I think it's the fourth box down. Exercise 25 we did in class. Very good exercise to practice this and the regular infinitives. That's on page 314. I highly recommend that. It's important for the test, so get familiar with it. Now, I'm going to go into this for the next part of the video. What we talked about before is just the verbs followed by the infinitives or the gerunds, but we also have some that can go either way. But I'm going to stop the video here and we'll come back and check it soon.